Do we know how many deaths Monsanto has caused? The simple answer is no. We don't know, and we probably never will. Why? Because the effects of their products, pesticides, herbicides, GMO seeds, are diffuse, sometimes slow, and often difficult to directly trace to a single cause. But what we do know is that thousands of sick individuals have filed lawsuits, that billions have been paid to settle those cases, and that there is so much smoke there is surely a massive fire. The company was founded in 1901 as a chemical manufacturer, but their real rise to infamy began decades later. Let's start with Agent Orange, one of the most devastating chemical weapons ever deployed. During the Vietnam War, the US military sprayed approximately 20 million gallons of herbicides across Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos in Operation Ranch Hand. About 11 million gallons of that was Agent Orange, partially manufactured by Monsanto. This wasn't just any chemical. Agent Orange contained dioxin, specifically TCDD, which is one of the most toxic compounds ever studied. The Vietnamese government estimates that 400,000 people were killed or maimed by these chemicals, with 500,000 children born with birth defects and up to 1 million people suffering health problems. American veterans weren't spared either. Over 300,000 Vietnam veterans have suffered illnesses related to Agent Orange exposure. The VA now recognizes conditions including multiple types of cancer, Parkinson's disease, and heart disease as connected to Agent Orange exposure. But that was just at wartime, right? Surely a company learns from such a devastating legacy, or perhaps they just find new ways to introduce toxic chemicals into the environment. In the 1990s, Monsanto faced massive litigation over PCB pollution. PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, are synthetic chemicals once used in electrical equipment, hydraulic fluids, and hundreds of industrial and commercial applications. Monsanto was the sole manufacturer of PCBs in North America from 1929 until they were banned in 1979. Why were they banned? Oh, just because they were incredibly toxic, persistent in the environment, and linked to cancer, immune system suppression, reproductive damage, and developmental problems. The town of Anniston, Alabama knows this story all too well. For nearly 40 years, Monsanto dumped PCBs into open-pit landfills and discharged toxic waste into streams around their factory there. Internal documents revealed that Monsanto knew about the dangers of PCBs for decades but concealed that information. In 2003, Monsanto and its chemical spin-off Solutia agreed to pay $700 million to settle claims brought by more than 20,000 Anniston residents. The settlement covered compensation for property damage, health issues, and the establishment of medical programs for the affected community. But wait, there's more, because when you're on a roll contaminating the government, why stop? Then came Roundup, Monsanto's flagship herbicide containing glyphosate. Developed in the 1970s, Roundup became the world's most widely used herbicide. You probably have some in your garage right now. In 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, a World Health Organization agency, classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic to humans. This classification was based on limited evidence of cancer in humans and sufficient evidence of cancer in experimental animals. The story gets murkier. Documents released during litigation revealed that Monsanto had ghostwritten research papers that were supposedly independently authored by scientists, suggesting safety for Roundup. These documents also indicated that a senior EPA official had worked to suppress a review of glyphosate by the US Department of Health and Human Services. Since then, thousands of lawsuits have been filed by people claiming Roundup exposure caused their non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In the first 3 cases to go to trial, juries awarded massive damages to plaintiffs. Dwayne Johnson, a school groundskeeper, was awarded $289 million, later reduced to $78 million. Edwin Hardiman, who used Roundup on his property for 26 years, was awarded $80 million. Alva and Alberta Pilliod, who used the herbicide for residential landscaping, were awarded an astounding $2 billion, later reduced to $86.7 million. When Bayer acquired Monsanto in 2018 for $63 billion, they inherited this legal nightmare. In 2020, Bayer agreed to pay over $10 billion to settle most of the US lawsuits, but thousands of claims remained unresolved. Let me ask you something. If you had to pay $10 billion to settle lawsuits about your product causing cancer, wouldn't you maybe stop maybe selling that product, or at least put a warning label on it? Not if you're Bayer Monsanto. The product remains on shelves worldwide, and the company continues to insist it's safe when used as directed. Because nothing says we stand by our product like paying billions to people harmed by it while refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. What's truly shocking isn't just the potential toxicity of these products, it's Monsanto's entire business strategy, a masterclass in corporate cynicism. Here's how it works. On one side, Monsanto sells Roundup, a powerful herbicide designed to kill weeds. On the other side, they sell genetically modified Roundup Ready seeds that are resistant to that very herbicide. Farmers can spray Roundup directly on their crops without killing them. Everything else dies, weeds, insects, soil microbes, but the crop survives. It's brilliant from a business perspective. It's also an ecological nightmare. This strategy created the perfect loop of dependency. Farmers buy Monsanto's GMO seeds, which require them to buy Monsanto's herbicide. And since Monsanto seeds are patented, farmers can't legally save seeds from their harvest for their next planting. They must buy new seeds from Monsanto every season. And Monsanto doesn't hesitate to enforce this dependency. Between 1997 and 2010, Monsanto filed 144 lawsuits against farmers for alleged patent infringement involving 410 farmers and 56 small businesses. Perhaps the most egregious case was that of Canadian farmer Percy Schmeiser. In 1998, Monsanto sued Schmeiser after their investigators found Roundup-ready canola plants on his farm. Schmeiser maintained that he never purchased Monsanto's seeds and that his fields were contaminated by pollen drift from neighboring farms or seeds scattered from passing trucks. Nonetheless, the Canadian Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in Monsanto's favor, finding that Schmeiser had violated Monsanto's patent rights regardless of how the seeds got there. Think about that for a moment. If Monsanto's genetically modified pollen blows onto your farm and pollinates your crops, you could potentially be sued for having their intellectual property without paying for it. Apart from the lawsuits, it's about control of the global food supply. By 2013, Monsanto controlled approximately 80% of the US corn market and 93% of the soybean market through its patented seed technology. This concentration of power over something as fundamental as food should concern all of us. When a handful of corporations control the seeds, they control the farmers. When they control the farmers, they control the food. And when they control the food, well, they control everything. Monsanto's model is a system driven by profit maximization, monoculture, and standardization. A system where soil health, ecosystem diversity, and human health are secondary considerations at best. Since 1950, there's been a 1,000% increase in pesticide use globally, yet crop losses to pests have remained relatively consistent. Meanwhile, we've lost an estimated 75% of agricultural biodiversity over the past century, as industrial farming has promoted a narrower range of crop variety. Large-scale monoculture farming, growing a single crop over vast areas, creates perfect conditions for pest outbreaks, requiring ever more powerful chemicals to control. It's a vicious cycle that benefits the chemical companies while depleting soil, polluting water, and decimating beneficial insect populations. The collapse of bee populations is particularly alarming. Since 2006, beekeepers have reported annual hive losses of 30 to 90%, with neonicotinoid pesticides produced by companies like Bayer strongly implicated as a major factor. The irony is almost painful. We're killing the very insects we need to pollinate our crops, to protect our crops. It's like burning down your house to get rid of mice. Also, agricultural workers face the highest exposure to these chemicals, with an estimated 385 million cases of acute pesticide poisoning occurring worldwide each year, and approximately 11,000 deaths. But the effects extend far beyond acute poisoning. In agricultural regions with high pesticide use, researchers have documented elevated rates of certain cancers, birth defects, and neurological disorders. The San Joaquin Valley in California, one of America's most productive agricultural regions, has some of the nation's highest rates of childhood cancer. The environmental impacts are equally severe. Pesticide and fertilizer runoff from industrial farms is the leading cause of water pollution in agricultural areas. The infamous dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, a 6,000 to 7,000 square mile area where marine life cannot survive, is largely caused by agricultural runoff from the Mississippi River Basin. Soil degradation is another hidden cost. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that 33% of the world's soil is moderately to highly degraded due to erosion, compaction, acidification, and chemical pollution. At current rates, the world could run out of topsoil within 60 years. And in the face of this mounting evidence, silence, denial, obfuscation. When studies show harm, industry-funded counter-studies emerge. When regulators raise concerns, armies of lobbyists descend on Washington. When farmers report problems, they're told they're using products incorrectly. It's not a conspiracy, it's just business, and business is very, very good. Perhaps the most troubling aspect of this story is how thoroughly companies like Monsanto have infiltrated the very agencies meant to regulate them. The revolving door between Monsanto and government regulatory bodies is well documented. Michael Taylor, for example, worked for the FDA, then became Monsanto's vice president for public policy, then returned to the FDA as deputy commissioner for foods. This is just one example among many. During the George W. Bush administration, Linda Fisher, a former Monsanto vice president, was appointed as deputy administrator of the EPA. During the Obama administration, Roger Beachy, a former director of a Monsanto-funded research center, was appointed as director of the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. This revolving door creates an environment where regulatory capture, the process by which regulatory agencies come to be dominated by the industries they're charged with regulating, becomes almost inevitable. It's like putting the fox in charge of the henhouse if the fox also owned stock in Kentucky Fried Chicken and was getting consulting fees from Colonel Sanders. The results are predictable. Studies have shown that the EPA has approved over 90% of pesticides without completing safety testing. The conditional registration loophole allows pesticides to enter the market before all safety studies are completed. When an industry has this level of influence over its regulators, the public interest inevitably suffers. Safety standards are weakened, warning signs are ignored, and products that should never reach the market find their way onto farms and into our food. As regulations tightened in the US and Europe, companies like Monsanto increasingly focused on expanding their markets in developing countries where environmental regulations and worker protections are often weaker. In India, Monsanto's Bt cotton, genetically modified to produce its own insecticide, was aggressively marketed to farmers as a solution to pest problems. Initial adoption was high, but many farmers soon faced financial ruin when the expensive seeds failed to deliver promised yields or required unanticipated additional pesticides. The crisis in India's cotton belt became so severe that between 1995 and 2013, an estimated 300,000 farmer suicides occurred, many linked to agricultural debt from failed harvests of GM crops. While Monsanto cannot be held solely responsible for this complex tragedy, their aggressive marketing tactics and inflated promises certainly contributed to the crisis. Think about that number for a moment. 300,000. That's more people than the population of Pittsburgh. Imagine an entire city disappearing. In Argentina, the expansion of Roundup-ready soy has led to widespread deforestation and a dramatic increase in birth defects and cancer rates in farming communities exposed to glyphosate spraying. A 2010 study in the province of Chaco found that birth defects quadrupled in areas where GM soy and rice crops are heavily sprayed. Similarly, in Paraguay, the rapid expansion of GM soy has displaced thousands of small farmers and indigenous people. Aerial spraying of pesticides has contaminated water sources and caused widespread health problems in rural communities. Across the globe, farmers and activists have organized resistance movements against companies like Monsanto. In 2018, German pharmaceutical giant Bayer acquired Monsanto for $63 billion. It's been called one of the worst corporate deals in history, as Bayer's stock value plummeted amid mounting Roundup lawsuits. Bayer has since tried to distance itself from the Monsanto name, officially retiring the brand, but a name change doesn't erase a legacy. The lawsuit continues. As of 2025, Bayer has paid out over $16 billion in settlements related to Roundup, with thousands of cases still pending. Despite these massive payouts, the company refuses to add warning labels about cancer risks to Roundup products or to pull them from the market. A 2018 study found glyphosate residues in 45% of conventional food products tested. The long-term health impacts of this exposure remain uncertain, but emerging research suggests potential links to a range of health issues, from gut microbiome disruption to endocrine system effects. So, returning to our original question, do we know how many deaths Monsanto has caused? No, we don't have a precise number, and we probably never will. There are alternatives. Agroecological farming methods have been shown to match or exceed the productivity of industrial agriculture while building soil health, supporting biodiversity, and eliminating toxic chemical use. Farmer-led seed-saving networks are preserving agricultural diversity and resilience. The question isn't whether we can feed the world without toxic chemicals and corporate control. We can. The question is whether we have the collective will to transform a food system that profits from destruction into one that nurtures life. If you want to understand how Bayer is handling Monsanto's toxic legacy, watch the video I recommend here. See you there. See you there.